Evening. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead and mark number 71 as the song of invitation. Seth has requested we sing As the Deer after his thoughts this evening. And then beforehand, we'll sing 647. 647. You probably don't need a book for this one. It's Soldiers of Christ Arise. We'll sing the first, third, and fifth verse. And if you will, please stand as we sing this song. Soldiers of Christ, arise and put your armor on, strong in the strength which God supplies, strong in the strength which God supplies through His beloved Son. Stand then in His great might, with all His strength endured. But take to arm you for the fight. But take to arm you for the fight, the panoply of God, that having all
Good evening. As I said, last time I did this, it was one record, so I don't get where this is good. Good job. Excellent work. A job well done. We all like to be praised for something we did, whether it be from our spouse, from our parents, co-workers, or even our kids. I had a former team lead now at work, and he was a very, very hard man to work. If I got a good job from him, one of two things happened with us. He would see what I had to go through to make production. If I had multiple problems, I fixed them the time and got it all set up. And or he would be in the trenches with me. In almost 3 years, I got 2 good jobs out of that. That's how hard it was to work. However, it would mean more things from him than it would be from the president, the owner, CEO, even the bank. Because he had seen where I had to go. And I mentioned your kids. How about cooking dinner? A lot of us can relate to this. Some of you know where I'm going with this. Cooking your kids dinner could be a brand new recipe that you just do. And I get more satisfaction out of this whenever my girls say, "Hey, this is excellent. You did a great job cooking this meal." Could be the first time I made it, could be the 100th time I made it. And I guarantee you, if I do it the exact same way the 7th or 101st time, Daddy, I don't like it. And we've all been done. The only time I don't want to hear "well done" at this side of heaven is whenever I'm cooking steak. I cannot stay and cook a well done steak voluntarily. Now, if I'm in a restaurant, okay, I have to. I can't do it. So if you come to my house, we're cooking steak, you want to well done steak, please do chicken and fish. I'm glad I did that for you. All right. We see the phrase "well done" in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 46. Jesus is talking about houses. And that's going to be chapter 25, verses 14 through 46. Talking about the master to the 3 servants, he gives talent to the servants, 2 of them double, administration service. The other one is at the parking lot. And then also we see later on in the chapter about the chief of police. I want us to put social media about this. And social media, you realize that social media can be a great tool. And what they say is, when I research and stuff like that, people think I sin so much, I'm not going to hear the word well done whenever I pass through this life. But I just say, stop in the life. In John chapter 6, verse 40, it says, "For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up from the last day." One of the phrases will be said after this life, into the activity of the well done, and beneficial servant, or the part of that, so they would do. The will of the Father is obviously who looks on the Son and believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And also, I believe also to repent and obey the gospel. For I can get all the well done, all the good job, that boy on this side of heaven. But I don't hear those words, well, I'm not good at the service of Jesus. I can do it just every Sunday. Because those words on this side of heaven, well done, that boy, great job, will make us better out. But those words of Jesus will have for eternity. There's a conversation that I have with somebody about stuff like this, and she's starting to ask questions I haven't really through life. So Megan and I encourage her to ask those questions. And we told her that we don't know the answer, we'll find somebody who can. I've done kind of cut out of a little bit. And once you mentioned that said, you can't take anything from this life lead you to heaven. Anything physical. So they said, well, Daddy, what do you mean? I said, when if you pass away, let's just say, you can't take this stuff in. He said, you got to watch that. You don't quite understand it. I said, but baby, there is one thing you can take in abundance with you in this life into the next. And she said, what's that? I said, you can take yourself. You can take your mom, your dad, your siblings, your friends, to where they will hear the words, well done. And she said, so I can say my Nana and my grandma, which is her very name. And I said, yes, I can. And I said, I bet they're running, jumping, doing cartwheels, having a good old time chasing me. And without missing a beat, she said, they can't do that at all. I said, well, baby, we had a conversation about this on the way here. I said, people who can't stay on this side of heaven, they will count that about the Jesus will be able to see. Hearing and bearing the same thing. It's really God. I ask also to do attitude because I long to hear those words, well done, my good and faithful servant. I so long to hear them. As the song goes, just as the deer bent for the water, so my soul longs after you. I long You are not Christian. You won't hear those words, well done, my good and faithful servant. You deserve the kingdom, church. You straight away, perfect opportunity to come forward and stand there.
We do thank you for being here with us tonight. I do hope everybody had a chance to grab an opportunity worksheet on your way in. If you didn't grab one of those, please grab one on your way to class and get up to date on what all is going on here in this coming weeks. Tomorrow morning, we do have our men's prayer breakfast at Alpha at 6 a.m. Compassion cards, Dad's group, it's your week this week. Those are ready tonight if you want to pick those up and sign those. Or you can get those Sunday and sign those then. This Sunday after AM service, our new member lunch will take place. So those of you who are planning on coming to it, that will be this Sunday after AM service. Also Sunday night, if you would like to help assemble the scarves, the hats and gloves that have been collected, they're going to be assembling those and they're going to distribute those Monday. So anybody who would like to help in that process, please be mindful of that. We do want to remember several on our sick list. We remember Joe Cooper as he is at Keystone Assisted Living. We want to remember him. We want to remember Steve Cooper, who has undergone test. And we want to remember him over some news he's gotten. We want to just keep him in our prayers. We also want to remember Jimmy Franklin, who is in Huntsville Hospital with infection on brain. He's struggling, so please remember him. We want to remember my grandmother. She'll be having ablation surgery this coming Wednesday on a kidney mass. We also want to remember Shirley Rich, who has a broke femur, who's had surgery. She's at J.W. Summers. So again, we've got several on our sick list, several shut-ins that we do want to be mindful of. Does anybody have any others that I haven't mentioned that we need to make aware or make the congregation aware of? Thank you for the prayers for me. I've had pneumonia. I appreciate Dad for filling in for me. I just want to continue to remember all of those too who have been sick, been in the hospital. It's a fun time of year. It's a very fun time of year. So we hope to have you back with us Sunday as we have our service or our class at 9, service at 10. At this time, we'll go ahead and be dismissed to our classes. That's right. I forgot one thing. If you are going to Lads to Leaders, just a reminder, the hotel deposit, that's due. So please see Gina Ferris, Gina Marks, I'm sorry. Gina Marks, I'm in a fog. I've been in a fog for the last 2 weeks. So please see her and try to get that taken care of. All right, let's go ahead and be dismissed.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? Anybody else tired? My hand's going higher than anybody's. Been a long day. I did have some good news though today. On Wednesdays, I get off work at 5, and it's been our practice for the last 85 years on Wednesday nights before church, we meet somewhere and eat. The good news comes in that I got to eat, but I didn't have to watch the news tonight. The news is depressing, isn't it? I'll get home Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and the dog has to talk to me a little bit, and Sherry and I talk a little bit, and usually the news is on. And it's really depressing. So on Wednesday nights, I get a reprieve from that. That's actually good news. You don't have to see what all's going on. But we've had a lot of devastating news over the last several months, haven't we? A couple of hurricanes come through and take out the East Coast, and they're still really struggling with that. And this congregation was real good in giving donations to the disaster relief. And I think I'm right on this. I haven't seen the totals lately, but disaster relief has given out over 700,000 meals since those hurricanes come through. That just blows my mind. And those people are still struggling. There's a lot of people living in tents in the Carolinas. They can't build them fast enough. I did read where a group of Amish people went somewhere not long ago and they built a bunch of mini houses and were able to house some people that way. People reaching out and trying to help one another. For the West Coast not to be left out, they're going through some pretty major things right now, aren't they? Going through fires that's just devastating. And that's what I've been watching for the last week or so on the news. You see all this stuff, and it's scary. It's kind of, to me, a lot of it's biblical. We're seeing fires. What cities were destroyed by fire in the Bible? Sodom and Gomorrah. And you see these fires coming through, and you just kind of wonder if things were like that back during that day. It seems like there's a flood mentioned in the Bible. Noah and the ark. And that's what we saw back a few months ago going through the East Coast. The Bible's still very alive and well today, and we can learn a lot from it. I don't really mean for this class to be a downer tonight, but the book that we're using in this class, it's a compilation of different writers through Heritage that have picked their favorite chapters or verses in the Old Testament and wrote lessons on it. And so when I volunteered to teach, I did a no-no. I said, just give me chapter 6. I found out what chapter 6 was last week. It's Job chapter 1. So it's a little bit depressing, but I think we can also get some positive benefits from it as well. So if you want to turn in your Bibles, we're going to be in Job tonight. We're just going to look at chapter 1. We won't go into a whole lot of great detail about Job, but there's still a lot of things that we can learn from Job that I think will help us out as we go through this study. And hopefully maybe some things you can take to encourage you when you hit rough times. Has everybody in here experienced rough times at one time or another in your life? If you haven't, I want you up here teaching because I want to find out how you avoided it. We all have our troubles, don't we? And we all respond to our troubles in different ways. We've had bad things to happen in our lives. How do people respond when times of trouble come along? Does everybody respond in the same way? We all have our ways of doing it. My dad he didn't show a lot of emotions in his life. I saw him get fired up a couple of times. Some other people saw him get fired up more than that. I was just a good child, so I didn't have to see it. But my brother saw a lot of it. But I can remember a few times in his life when he got fired up. My grandmother looked out her window one night. She lived in an apartment house on Mobile Street, downtown. And she just happened to look out and see somebody out there with the hood up on her car trying to steal her battery. She started banging that window and they took off running. She called my dad and he said, "Come on." He said, "We're going up there." And I come on. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I had clothes on, but if I hadn't, I would have gone on. He was fired up. But for the most part, when bad times happened, he kind of chilled out. He could handle it. Now, on the inside, I know he was tore up. You know, he and my mom set a very good example for me when my twin brother was so sick. They tried to assure me that I was okay and Barry was going to be okay. Of course, we lost Barry and what have you, but they handled that problem very well because they relied on God. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. But some people are going to respond different ways. They're going to say, "Why me?" Do you know people that way? Some of them are going to say, "I don't deserve this to happen to me," or "Why couldn't it have happened to somebody else?" Or, "You know, I tried to do the right thing and yet all these bad things happen." People respond in different ways. My Bible reading this year, I've chosen a little bit different pattern than what I've done the last year or two. And I'll be honest with you, I'm going back from the very start of the Bible. I'm going through it this year again. And I try to read through the Bible every year, but I do it in different ways. I'm starting at the beginning and going through. And I just got through reading about Joseph and how he took care of his family and handled some bad situations in a very positive way. Joseph dies, and after he dies, he's forgotten. The new king has forgotten about Joseph and what he did to save the land. And all of a sudden, the children of Israel are now slaves. And they're being really tortured, really just given a rough time. And I think it's very interesting. In Exodus 2, verse 25, the children of Israel are moaning and groaning about what they're going through. But there's one 3-word statement there that gives us hope. It says, "And God knew." God knows what we're going through. And he knew what Joseph was going through as he was going through his life. And so I want us to kind of keep that in mind as we go through this tonight. The Bible gives us several passages that tell us that we're going to go through times of trouble and that we need to hang in there. James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, a passage that's very familiar to us. It tells us to count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. The New King James Version says patience. We learn to deal with those items. I've always thought it was kind of odd that James would say, be glad when it's not going right. But we draw encouragement that we're going to come out stronger on the other end. Have you ever been through a trial or something that's really tested you, and at the other side of it you look back and go, maybe that wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be, or I've been through this before, I can handle it again. That's what James is telling us. You're going to come out stronger on the other end when you go through these trials. John chapter 16, very good passage, verse 33. Jesus is about to go to the cross. He's been trying to prepare his disciples to hang in there. He's fixing to go through some rough stuff, and they are too. They don't realize it. They've been around him, and he's telling them, I'm about to leave. You're going to be on your own. God's going to send you a helper, and you'll make it through these things. In John 16:33, Jesus says, these things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. So we're going to face tough times. That's a given. But God is with us the whole time, and we need to lean on Him. So whenever we hear about people having tough times or bad things happening to good people, my mind goes back to Job quite a bit. Job went through a whole lot. And maybe you know people that are in that situation or have been in that situation. Some of you have been in that situation. We've all struggled with different things. So what do we do when good things or bad things happen to good people? That's an age-old question that will probably never be answered in a precise way. We each are going to handle these things the best way we know how at the time. And so let's kind of look at Job tonight, draw a few lessons from him. Maybe it'll help us out down the road when troubles come our way again. I can promise you, you're going to have your share of troubles. But God will see you through it during those times. Now, Job is actually in the poetry section of the Old Testament. I always thought poems were supposed to rhyme, but they say this is poetry. And it's there with Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. It's got a lot of good points in it. Job, more than likely, lived during the time of Genesis. And a lot of your Bible scholars will tell you that it could have been right before the flood or just right after the flood. That's kind of interesting to me. That lets us know that troubles have been going on since the beginning of time, basically. And if you've been reading your devotional books this week, it's been talking about Cain and Abel. Did they have problems this week? Yeah. Brotherly love, or the lack thereof. And so troubles have always been around, and Job is a really good example of what to do. As we begin reading in Job, in verse 1, you're going to see that Job was blameless. He was upright. He feared God, and he shunned evil. Are those good qualities to have? I hope you have them. Maybe we have some more of some of them than we do others, but those are qualities in our life that we need. Do you know people that have those four qualities in their life? Can you think of examples of people that fit that way. You know, one of the pat answers in the men's class on Wednesday nights is when you start talking about encouragement, who do you think of? Guess what name we hear so often in that classroom? Glenn Dupie. Glenn's been gone a year now. It's hard to believe. It's right at a year. But he had those qualities. I thought of him when I saw those qualities. But now, if you talk to Glenn Dupie back in the day, oh no, not me. He's very humble about it. Do you know people that fit in that category? We're supposed to have those qualities, but we're not supposed to be bragging about them, are we? Glenn Dupie would never brag on himself. Such a good man, a good example for us. Blameless, what does that mean? Well, basically, he was doing the right thing all the time around other people, and nobody could accuse him of anything wrong. David Sane, years ago, used to have a radio spot, come on every afternoon, WQLT. And 60 golden seconds, I think is what he called it. But he referred to a passage that says, live your life in such a way that if somebody says something bad about it, everybody else is not going to believe it. That's what Job was. He was living the right way. He was upright. He was keeping God first, and he knew that God was watching him. So he was making sure that he was doing the right thing. You know what we call that today? Doing the right thing when nobody else is watching? Integrity. He had integrity. We're supposed to have integrity. I can't always say that I do, because if I go somewhere and there's a Reese cup, I will get it. I lose my integrity. But it's a quality that we should have. Fear God. Y'all fear God? I'll give you your answer. You do. You're here on a Wednesday night. Is to fear God a bad thing? No. I feared Dean Pennell. Dean Pennell was my dad. He was about that tall. But he always said dynamite comes in small packages. And he was right. I feared my dad, but I loved him to death. We're supposed to be that way with God. And Job kept himself away from evil. We're supposed to do that as well. And these features, they came naturally to Job. And they should be natural traits for us as well. And these are qualities that we are to pass on to the next generation. You don't keep them just for yourself. You're using them so you can share them with your kids, with your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whoever. They need to see those examples. Look down verse 2, you're going to see that Job was a family man. He had 10 children. That was nothing unusual back in biblical times, was it? You had large families. Some of y'all were raised up in large families. My dad had 3 brothers and 1 sister. My mom had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. There was 7 of them back in the Depression. That's when they were coming up. And people had large families because they needed the kids to work on the farm and help take care of the family. Job did the same thing. Job was blessed with 7 sons and 3 daughters. And these children were exceptional. He taught them right. They had a lot of the same qualities that he did. His sons would take turns hosting their brothers and sisters at their house on different occasions. They stayed together, and there's some lessons that we'll talk about in just a moment that come from that. He was very wealthy. Cecil, I thought about you when I was on this part of the lesson. Because if anybody in this auditorium could take care of his sheep and his goats and everything else, you could have. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys. Cecil could take care of it. That's incredible, isn't it? He was very wealthy. He earned it the right way. He worked at it. He had many servants, it goes on to say, that helped him take care of all this stuff. He was very, very blessed. You know, he must have been very good at business to accumulate that much. And he was respected by the ones that he dealt with, just like Larry is at the pawn shop. He's respected. That's how you grow a business. You earn your public's respect, and they pass that along. And Larry, am I right that word of mouth advertising is better than anything else? And that's how you build a business. That's how Job did the things that he did. Good lesson for us there. And in verse 4, he taught his children right. Let's look at verse 4. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day. And they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Let's go on with verse 5. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them. And he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did. Does your verse have one extra word there? Continually is what mine has in here. It wasn't just, well, if I think about it, I'll do it. Job was very serious about the spiritual welfare of his children. And I've seen that in so many of y'all. Sherry and I have talked about Joshua quite a bit here lately. Things are going very well for Joshua. He's very blessed. He'll tell you that he is. He just got a job promotion within the last week. Tough thing is, Dustin Culberson's the one that has to put up with that job promotion. But we're blessed, and Joshua will tell you that he's blessed. But the thing that Sherry and I have talked about so much is these are things that we prayed for when Joshua, before he even come in this world. And I'm sure Job did the very same thing with his children. He was praying for them before they got here, and he was making sure that he taught them right. And do you think that example was seen by his children? If you don't think your kids are watching your spiritual life, be careful. They are. You could have knocked me over with a feather one Sunday morning. It's been a long time back. Joshua got up to lead a prayer. I was proud of him. But you know what he did? He started his prayer like I do. Our Heavenly Father, we love you. It hit me that day. He's been watching me. Scares me to death. But we've got to set that example for our children, just like Job did his children. I love verse 5, what we just read. His children's spiritual well-being was his main focus in life. But then, when we get to verse 6, we're going to see that things go south. They take a turn for the worst on the spin of a dime. Is that how your troubles come along? Are you expecting your trouble when they hit you? I never have. It hits me out of the blue. I'm sure it does you as well. God's meeting with his angels one day, and they're discussing things, and the devil shows up. Now, Adam did a good job in this class a few Sunday mornings ago talking about God and his nature, and this particular scene, I'll be honest with you, it kind of goes over my head. Why would the devil be with the angels? But, you know, the devil was an angel at one time. He got kicked out of heaven. And God asked him what he's been doing, and he's talking, well, I've been to and fro to the earth. In other words, I've been scoping out my territory to see who I can get next. And God says, hey, you ever watch Job? He's a pretty good guy. He's a good servant. As you read through verse 6 and through those next following verses, you'll see that Satan says, yeah, I've watched him. You know what? He's just like everybody else. He's only doing good because you're blessing him. There's a lesson for us there. We have to obey God and serve him during good times and the bad times. And Job says, if you took everything away from him, he'd quit serving you in a heartbeat. So God says, hey, go ahead and test him. And he does. So one day comes along and it starts hitting him with a vengeance. Let's look at verses 6 through 12. Now there was a day when the Son of God came and presented them, or sons of God came and presented themselves before the Lord, and Satan also with them. We just talked about that. And verse 7 tells us that God says, have you considered Job? Verse 8, and the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil? Then Satan answered, well, does Job fear God for no reason? You have put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side. You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hands. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So as we get down to verse 13, we're going to see what Satan's going to do. The lesson right there for us is Satan does the same thing to us. There's some days that you know Satan's after you, and some days you don't. Peter tells us in 1 Peter that the devil goes about like a roaring lion, seeking who he can devour. I've shared in class before on Sunday nights, we always was at church 5 hours early, or it seemed like we were. Mom and Dad wanted to get there early, so if church met at 7 o'clock, we left at 4 o'clock that morning. Not really, but we did leave early, right about the time Animal Kingdom come on. Do any of y'all remember Animal Kingdom? Love that show. But what was fascinating was when they would have lions and the lions were seeking their prey, they didn't just walk up to them, did they? They got down on all fours and they creeped. They were very quiet. They snuck up on it. They started watching a herd of whatever they were going to attack. And that lion would sit there and he'd watch and he'd go, ooh, that's the weak one right there. People sometimes, we're the weak ones. The devil sees our weakness and he pounces on us. That's what's going to happen to Job here. The devil's going to go after him full force. So the devil puts all this together. In verses 13 through 15, the first report we get is that his oxen and his donkeys have been stolen. Well, that's pretty bad. We talked a while ago, of all the animals he had. That's a pretty big lick. And then another servant comes and he says, Job, I've got some bad news. Now your sheep and your shepherds have been killed. A storm has killed them. Only one servant survived. That's the one that came and told him the bad news. And then we read that the Chaldeans have come and stolen his camels. Chaldeans were bad news. They were people that were very, very mean, very powerful. And they've killed your servants. Now, I'm the only one that survived to come and tell you. Wow. You look out in California and you see these fires coming and they've been evacuated, and when they get to go back, some of them went back and their houses were still there. Most of them went back and they're a pile of rubble. What would your reaction be? It'd be pretty rough. Somebody stole your car. If it's a car that you really like, you'd be tore up, wouldn't you? If a friend got murdered, that'd be pretty bad. Job had servants that were murdered. But the part that hit him the worst was when that servant came and said, your sons and your daughters were together, and a storm come through and caved in the house. All your children are dead. Whew. That would be rough. Some of you know that pain. I don't know it directly, but I've watched some of my family go through losing a child. It's bad. It's a pain that never goes away. And it's a pain that you have to learn to live with, and it's very tough. How would you respond to all this bad news? It'd be tough. We would each respond in a different way. My brother, when he lost his middle son, Will, to a drowning, and I've shared this with you before, Ronnie went into a minister mode when that happened. He was so concerned about how all the rest of the family was handling that bad news that he didn't take time to grieve for himself. Grief is a process. It has to be gone through. Finally, he and I had an opportunity to talk one day, and he said, Gary, he said, I've been trying to help so many other people. He says, how do I help myself? I couldn't give him an answer, but I did tell him, I said, Ronnie, you've got to grieve like everybody else. And with the process of time, he did, and he worked through it. He still misses Will terribly, just like the rest of us do. It's something we'll never get over, but he's taken that tragedy, and whenever somebody loses a child, Ronnie's one of the first ones to go see them. A year to the day that Will drowned, Josh Willingham's brother got killed in a car wreck. And I just happened to be, I went to the cemetery that morning, and the Willinghams were living on the old Chisholm Road at that time, and Ronnie's car was there early in the morning. I thought, what's going on? And later in the day, I found out. John Willingham had been killed in a car wreck. And Ronnie has helped countless people do that. When bad things happen to good people, good people take that opportunity to try to serve God in some way. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's something that we need to look at how we go about doing that. Job responds in a very interesting way. Look down at verse 20. Then Job arose and he tore his robe and he shaved his head and he fell on the ground and worshiped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Wow. When something bad happens, we've got to remember that God is still there for us. He went to the right source. He remembered God and knew that God had not forgotten him. God is always there. He knows what we're going through. He knew all about Job's life. Job reflects on his life, and from the time of his birth till death, he realizes that the earthly possessions are a gift or a loan from God. He spoke of loss, and he recognized that God is good all the time. At Will's funeral, Jeffrey, Will's youngest brother, got up and spoke. We didn't know if he'd be able to or not, but he got up. And the passage that he quoted before he started, "This is the day that the Lord has made. I'll be glad and rejoice in it." At a funeral. And there's a lot of truth in that. We have to remember that God is the same all the time, and He's there for us in the good times and the bad. Let me just share a few things that maybe we can kind of reflect on and see if it helps us when the bad times happen to us. You know, Job, Satan knew what he was doing, and he was doing everything he could do to bring Job down. He was attacking what he thought was Job's weaknesses, but he didn't realize that Job's strength was God. We have to build that relationship with God. We have to work on it daily, don't we? We need to be in His Word. We need to see what He says, and we need to be praying to Him and asking Him for that help. You know, it's very important that we communicate with God. We do that by looking at His Word. And sometimes we do that just by sitting still and just trying to listen for Him. You know, it's one of Sherry's favorite places to go is down at the river. I like it every once in a while because I'll stop at Bunyan's Barbecue and meet Sherry down there. And we'll have us a little picnic in the car. It's good. But she likes to sit there and watch that water. It's a good time for her to sit there and reflect on life. Maybe you have different things that you do as well. Remember that God's always there. Psalm 46, verse 1, tells us that God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in the time of trouble. He's there. He knows what's going on. Psalm 55, verse 22, cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He shall never permit the righteous to be moved. He's going to take care of His children. He's going to take care of you and me. Isaiah 41, verse 10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, For I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. James tells us basically the same thing. Draw near to God and He'll draw near to you. That's what we have to do. You know, we know that this story will actually have a very good ending at the end of it. We see a lot of good dialogue between God and Job and Job's friends. There's so many other lessons that we could touch on. One lesson we could touch on was that Job's wife was going through the same thing he was. A lot of times we tend to forget that. Job, I'm sure in his way, tried to help her, but sometimes, you know, it doesn't work. But they faced it as a couple. We also know that Job's friends did a good thing by coming and being there with him for a while. Their problem was they opened their mouths. Always be there for the people that are in trouble. And don't worry about what you got to say.